friends, welcome back to my channel. My name is Amelia and today we're going to be in my reading journal yet again. We're going to be filling it out for all of my September reads, but I'm going to be doing something slightly different this time. So normally I will do a video filling in my reading journal with all my September reads and then a separate video where I review and talk about everything that I read in September. And I think that it would work better if I combined them. So that is what we're going to try today. As I'm filling out my reading journal, I'm going to talk about the books that I am creating spreads for. Hopefully that will make both of those videos more interesting, because instead of just looking at my face while I talk about books, you'll have some art stuff to look at. And sometimes I felt like I didn't have enough to talk about when I was just setting up the spreads. So hopefully being able to talk about the books will give some more interest to that part of the video as well. So let's go ahead and jump into my reading journal and let me know what you think of this new format in the comments. All right, welcome back to my reading journal. So as usual, we are starting off with my month in review page, and I've gone ahead beforehand and sketched in all of my little, I don't know what you're gonna call them, visualizations, I guess, of the data that we're looking at. So with this one, I had the central circle, so I had to get a little bit more creative in terms of how I was showing all my information, because I wasn't going to be able to fit the bar graph that I have used a few times. So we have a few more interesting sort of shapes, some circles and stuff, but we're doing the usual data. So I've got the average rating, star rating, the number of pages, the total, the lowest, highest, and then the pages by day of the week, and then just the page distribution across the books that I was reading. So it's all the same stuff that I usually put in, and I got a pretty decent, I would say, reading month this month with an average star rating of a 3.6. I think that is the lowest so far of the since I've been doing the average star rating month in review sort of page. But I still feel like 3.6 is pretty good. That's nearly 4 stars, and 4 stars is I don't know, I feel like I don't really that often read 5-star books. I try to reserve that. I don't really know why, just because, I guess. I just want to be able to have a tier that really sets apart those really good books, I guess. So yeah, we are going in now with some of the same colors from the Fox drawing, just the orange and then 2 shades of green, and just filling all those colors in. And yeah, that is pretty much all there is to the month in review spread. It's not super crazy. I'm pretty happy with the way it turned out, but I do also feel like maybe there's a bit more white space than I would have liked there to be, but there is also a lot of white space on just the September title page, so maybe it matches better that way. I don't know. And then we are just quickly flipping back to my yearly spreads because I have a few updates to make. So for example, I have a square to fill in on my bingo, as well as my series tracker needed to be updated. And then we are flipping back into September to get started on the pages read tracker. It's the same thing as usual, just putting in the dates, the titles, and then of course the number of pages that I read each day. Actually, I think this month is one of the ones where I read the fewest number of days. I didn't get that far down my pages read tracker, so I guess that is what it is. I was gonna say it's unfortunate, but what can you do? Not much. But I still read a decent number of pages. So I read 1,551 pages this month, which is definitely the lowest. I read about 2,300 last month. I think 2,600 the month before, and then 3,000 the month before that. So we've been steadily going downhill, which is unfortunate, I guess, but sometimes you just run out of energy for things. Then we're moving on to the spread for The Great Hunt. I chose rabbits because I feel like those are kind of related to hunting, and I'm trying to stay within the woodland theme. I did make a pretty big mistake on this page where I accidentally filled it in with a review for Crossroads of Twilight, so I had to put another page on top of it and then write out the review for Great Hunt. So let's go ahead and talk about Great Hunt. So this is, of course, the second book in the Wheel of Time series, and honestly, I kind of forgot that I even read this in September. I guess I was already a good portion of the way through it at the beginning of September, so that's probably a part of why I kind of forgot I read it. But it was a good reminder of like how much fun and action the first Wheel of Time books are before like getting slowed down with all of the politics and like the nuance that comes on in the later books. I love like watching all of our main characters as they try to begin to like come into who they really will be in the later books and start learning about like their powers, their strengths, and their weaknesses. An early book, Rand is so like vulnerable and naive, and honestly, it's kind of almost like sweet and refreshing in comparison with how like hard he makes himself become in later books. Like in the first book, Great Hunt also has kind of like a main quest, which I really like because it gives us something like tangible to work towards that can actually be accomplished in one book. And it definitely makes it a lot more satisfying when we get the feeling that our characters like definitively accomplished something in this book. So like by the end of the book, it's like, okay, we got something done, which is something that the middle books tend to lack. And then we also get a few new characters introduced in this entry that will have big parts to play in coming books. But let's go ahead and move on to the next. All right, so next up we have a 2-page spread. Well, it's two separate books, but I sort of did the decoration across both pages as kind of one unit. So we're gonna have Crossroads of Twilight and then also a Venom Dark and Sweet. So with Crossroads of Twilight, most of the book is kind of spent back in time with each group of characters, showing them reacting to what Rand did at the end of the previous book. And initially I did really enjoy this setup. However, I felt that as the book like wore on, I started to get tired of it because it didn't feel like the story was progressing, like we were just reliving the same moment kind of again and again. And I was especially disappointed in Egwene's storyline. She's probably my favorite character. So I spent most of the book kind of looking forward to getting her perspective. And then when we finally do get it, it feels like not much happens. And then when she finally like gets around to starting the thing that she's been kind of building up to for like a couple books now, it immediately goes wrong. And like I appreciate characters having setbacks, but my sort of problem with it and like with Wheel of Time in general is that in Wheel of Time there's often not enough like wins to balance the setbacks. So like yeah, Rand did achieve this great thing in the end of the last book, but so far it hasn't even appeared like that much of a win, so it doesn't feel as balanced. And like obviously they need a lot of setbacks because there's so many books, but like maybe, just maybe, and Wheel of Time fans, don't get too mad at me for this here, but there just may be too many books in this series. But aside from that, this entry feels like pretty standard. All the writing and stuff is good. At the moment, I think I'm the most interested in Mat's storyline. It has the most going on, and I'm interested in like the other side characters that he's with. So overall, a decent entry, but I'm really starting to look forward to some of these storylines and loose ends wrapping themselves up. All right, so moving on to a Venom Dark and Sweet. I gave this one 2.5 out of 5 stars. It's been several weeks now since I read it, and honestly, I've forgotten quite a few of the main plot points, so I feel like that just tells you all that you need to know about the book. It's definitely not as good as the first book. We lose the structure of the competition, and so I just feel like the story kind of fell apart a bit without that. Like, we spent all of the book going on these like side quests to do these little things, and then everything wraps up like really quickly at the end. So the pacing is a bit wonk, and it also just felt like it was way too easy to wrap everything up. Like the main characters didn't even really have to do anything. These like artifacts just like healed themselves and fixed all the problems for them. So I wasn't a very big fan of that. I felt the ending was quite unsatisfying. After that, we have a 2-page spread that's actually all for one book this time. This is going to be for Yumi and the Nightmare Painter. So I ended up giving this one 4.5 out of 5 stars. This is Secret Project number 3 from Brandon Sanderson. And I tried to avoid seeing like other people's reviews before reading this myself, but I did still hear stuff about it. You know, I heard that it was very highly rated, and a lot of people were saying it was their favorite Secret Project so far. Personally, I think that I prefer Tress, but this was a really good book. It had very interesting and unique world building. So this book is also technically part of the Cosmere, like Sanderson's greater sort of world, but like Tress, you don't actually have needed to have read anything else in that world for it to make sense. Like, at least that's how I felt about it. Like, we do sort of talk a little bit about some characters, I guess, that are part of like the greater Cosmere, but they don't really matter. It's just kind of like a perspective that it's told from. So if you have not read anything else in the Cosmere, you are free to read this and you will not be held back by not knowing anything else. And yeah, it's actually told from the point of view as the same being as Tress is told from, so it kind of has that same tone and kind of lighthearted, almost like sarcastic feeling asides. And somehow I think I liked it better in this book than in Tress, but maybe that was just like because I was kind of familiar with it because I had read that sort of point of view in Tress, so I don't know. Or maybe I just feel like it was more suited to this book, or it was less intense. I don't know. But yeah, like I was saying, I haven't actually read any Sanderson outside of the Secret Projects, but from the Secret Projects that I have read so far, I have to say I'm very impressed with how he seems to always have some really unique concept in his book that sets them apart creatively. So for example, in this one, and this isn't like a spoiler or anything, it's just kind of like the main premise, I would say, but we have nightmares that can be painted to like defeat them, and the idea of stacking in like mathematical sequences as art to attract spirits. Like, I certainly have not read any books with like similar concepts, so it's really interesting to see, and it's like a good breath of fresh air, you know, to have something so unique and different aside from like the medieval fantasy kind of tropes. And it's also really nice to have standalones, because I mean, fantasy series tend to be long and involved, and sometimes I can only read so many at a time before I run out of brain space for them. So it's nice to have standalones like these that are creative and interesting and different and don't require you to commit to like 14 books. So yeah, it is really nice to have those as like a good break for when you don't have the mental energy to start another series and hold all those world and plot details in your mind. So yeah, that is not Tress, Yumi and the Nightmare Painter by Brandon Sanderson. And in terms of the decoration, I went with a vine sort of stem that was kind of similar to the leaves and stuff on the like September cover page. And then I did a couple of lines that are kind of meant to represent the like high-on lines that are in Painter's World, but I decided to just use the colors that meet my theme instead of the actual colors that they are in the book, which is like pink and turquoise or something like this, I think, or teal or whatever. It doesn't matter. And I did read this book as part of a vlog that will be coming up soon, and I also have more thoughts. As you can see, I've written down definitely more than I've said here, but I don't want to repeat myself too much, so I am saving part of that review for that video. So hopefully it will be out this weekend, so go ahead and check that out if you want to know my more complete thoughts on Yumi and the Nightmare Painter. Alright, so just going ahead and erasing some of my pencil lines, and then this spread is just about complete. I decided to include a little quote at the bottom because I've seen other people do that, but I haven't done it before, so I thought I'd try something a little new. And then we are flipping over into the final 2 pages for this sort of setup, I guess you would say. So these are for the wager on the left, and then on the right is going to be Golden Fool. So the wager, I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. I picked it up because I had listened to Endurance, which is another nautical sort of nonfiction book, and I had seen Wager everywhere in stores and heard some people talk about it, so I decided to pick it up. Personally, I think the Endurance was much better. I think one of the main reasons Wager just fell a bit flat for me was all the people in it kind of sucked, so it was really hard to root for them. Obviously, they were real people, so you can't really change what one or another did to make it like a more compelling story, but it just lacked those moments that allowed you to connect with the characters and care about them, because they didn't really have like good moments, you know? Like in Endurance, it would talk about those kind of like rare moments where the crew had managed to find joy despite their circumstances, and it made them feel like much more alive and human, like when you're reading it. And it gave the story like a light in the dark that, you know, allowed you to like care more about these people and like the mission. Wager was just like, each of these groups is flawed and contains people who are mean and selfish. And instead of working together, the crew is splintered, and it's kind of like each man for themselves. And again, like, it is a nonfiction, so it's a true event. So it's not specifically the fault of like the book or the author. I just think that the story of the Wager is like not as touching or like human as the Endurance. I think the author did do a pretty good job putting the story together, although I did feel that some segments kind of jumped around in time a bit sort of strangely as the different groups were leaving the island, and it was a bit hard to tell where each group was in the timeline like compared to others. So it's a pretty well put together book. The audiobook was good, well narrated, and I would really say that its only failing is that it tells the story of too many unlikable people, so it's harder as a reader to care about them or root for them or be really connected to the story. So, in terms of my reading journal, I probably should have done one page at a time so that it would match up a little bit better with my reviews. However, in this one, I did kind of a lot of the decorative elements first and then went in with the writing. So I'm going to jump back in a moment to like filling out the sheet for the Wager. But I am just going to go ahead and start talking about Golden Fool. So I gave Golden Fool 4 out of 5 stars. It is the second book in the Tawny Man trilogy. And unfortunately, I do have to say that this book definitely suffers a bit from middle book syndrome. Objectively, I would probably say that it should rate slightly lower than what I have given it, but I love Fitz and Hobbs' world, so I am kind of biased. Actually, speaking of Fitz, he does get kind of annoying in this book. Like, I get he's still recovering from the traumatic incident that occurred at the end of the last book, but he just keeps like making the wrong decisions and saying the wrong things to everyone in his life, and then he mopes around about how alone he is, but he does not put in the effort to patch up the relationships that he threw a spanner into. Like, he will do one tiny thing to like try and reach out to the Fool after their argument, and then be like, oh, well, you know, I tried, and the Fool didn't do anything to like reconnect with me, even though Fitz put in like the least possible amount of effort to fix the problem that he caused in their relationship by being kind of homophobic. And he just goes through the book being like, why does nobody understand me? And it feels quite juvenile, and it's kind of annoying. And he kind of explained sort of like why he was like this in the end, but it also just kind of feels like it's still annoying to read, you know, even if there's like a genuine sort of reason for why he's kind of messed up. But part of what I love about like Hobbs' book is Fitz and the Fool's relationship. So them spending quite a bit of this book like mad at each other and not really speaking or interacting is also kind of annoying, because it's like, oh, this is like my favorite relationship, and we're not getting like any of it because Fitz doesn't know how to, I don't know, speak to people, I guess. However, the political intrigue in this book is kind of like next level. Not a lot happens in this book that isn't political. So if you're not interested in like political fantasy, that kind of thing, then this trilogy in general is probably not for you. There is a lot of politics in most of Hobbs' series, but this is probably one of the more like politics heavy, action light ones. I mean, there is definitely action, but not that much in this one especially. But if you do like the politics, then the Buckkeep politics in this book are really interesting and dynamic, and you're always sort of second guessing the meaning of what characters do and say and trying to figure out what their real goals are, which I personally find quite interesting. And once the story got going, I was really sucked in, even though it does kind of have a bit of a slow start. But the second half, I got really stuck into the story and read like 300 plus pages in a day. So I can't complain too much about the pacing because I still managed to like be really drawn in and intrigued. Alright friends, welcome back. Sorry about the end cutting off a bit there. I think my camera died just before I had finished recording that segment, so my apologies, but that is all that I read in September, so I hope you enjoyed this new format. Again, let me know in the comments if you did, and let me know what you read in September. But that is all that I have time for today. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.